17. At that time, Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan River so that John would baptize him. John tried to stop him and said, "I need to be baptized by you, yet you come to me?" Jesus answered, "Allow me to be baptized now. This is necessary to fulfill all righteousness." So John agreed to baptize Jesus. When Jesus was baptized, he immediately came up out of the water. Heaven was opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God coming down like a dove and resting on him. A voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I dearly love. I find happiness in him." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Now, in my past life, I used to love to go down and just sit by the river. And working by the river for a lot of years, it gave me a lot of opportunities to sneak out and just go and sit and have a quiet time of reflection. And I just loved it. You could just sit and watch the river. Of course, in the summertime, you could watch some pretty entertaining things on the river, especially if you were sitting at the Nantahala Falls, right? And some of you at some point in your life might even have been the entertainment coming through the falls at the Nantahala. And I knew some folks that worked for NOC that would even show up at lunch. There'd be a little gang of them that show up at lunch, and they'd bring out their cards. It looked like the gymnastics at the Olympics, right? And so somebody would come through the falls and fall out and feet would be up in the air. "Oh, bent knee, 8. If they were pointing their toe and they fell out, 10. Oh, for sure, 10 every time. And so it was entertaining, but more than anything, it was nice to just go and sit by the river and just listen for the flow and try to get in touch with the flow of the Spirit, or reflecting on God's creation and God's beauty. It was wonderful. I still sneak out every once in a while, and Aaron and I definitely snuck out a couple times last summer and did that, but it's just a beautiful thing. But now with modern technology, you know that there are webcams on the river, so you can watch the river running on the internet. I think they call it live streaming, but I'm not sure. Well, Jesus loved to be around the water too. He was always hanging around the water. And other people hung around the water too. I mean, Jesus was hanging around the water, and we see him at the river with John today. We saw him around or on the lake so many times in so many gospel stories, so many of the stories that we see Jesus. I mean, he even had fishermen as some of his disciples, certainly. And he had, I guarantee you, a huge fishing community that followed him and followed his ministry around Galilee. I wonder maybe if he might have even told stories about the water, where he's got all the fishermen's sons all kind of lined up over here in a little pile, just listening to Jesus, and he's probably telling the story. "Kids, I was out with your dads one day, and they took off and left me, and I had to walk all the way across the Sea of Galilee, barefoot." I wonder how he told stories to those kids, and I know that they would have loved it. And I know that he just loved being around the water. So it shouldn't be surprising that we see Jesus show up in this story, in this first story of him that launches his adult ministry, the first story of him as an adult. We see him at the river with John, hanging out by the river. And John was there, of course. John was was preaching a message of repentance. And there were a lot of people that were coming. They recognized that this was something that needed to be said. A lot of people were coming from town. They were coming from the big city, Jerusalem. A lot of people were coming from the countryside, but just coming to John to hear his message, but to be baptized for the forgiveness of sins. You see, John felt that it was really important that people be able to let this go. That they not be controlled by whatever this sin is in their lives. Or that they don't control others with whatever this sin is in their life. And so when Jesus showed up, he was like, no, this is not, no, I shouldn't be baptizing you. You should be baptizing me. But you see, Jesus had a little bit different idea about baptism. When Jesus came to the water, he recognized that it was important that we not let these things hold us back. That we not be encumbered by these sins that hold us down. That tie up our hearts, that tie up our minds, that tie up our lives in keeping us from living as children of God. But Jesus, he wanted to let us know, just as he let John know, that he came to fulfill righteousness. Now, righteousness can, like most words in the Bible and most words in any language, can cover a lot of things. But righteousness means to fulfill, to be drawn closer to God, to really be filled with God's love. You see, when we're filled with God's love and we're in a close relationship with God, that's when we're found to be righteous. And Jesus wanted us to know that. Jesus wanted us to let go of anything that's keeping us back from kingdom living, any sin, that we can let it go. But then Jesus wanted us to know that he set a new paradigm, that we can't just let something go, but that we have to be made new. And that baptism was a symbol. Baptism reminded us that God makes us new. That this relationship with God that we claim and claims us through baptism renews us as children of God. And if we look at that word renew, it tells us that we are made new, right? We are made into a people, the beloved, that have been created for relationship with God, that have been created for relationship with neighbor, that have been created for relationship with other. I found it kind of interesting how the kids' story fit in with this story pretty well. Of how when Jesus came to bring the good news, when he was telling people that he was bringing this good news, that he was all about the oppressed, the poor, those that were struggling. Because for them, it was often hard to see that they had any kind of relationship, a loving relationship with God. And so when Jesus came to be baptized, he came as God's beloved, God's loved Son, to proclaim that we are all the beloved, to proclaim the good news to all of us, that if we let the things go that hold us back and move forward in God's love. Then God's kingdom comes on earth as it is in heaven. That God's kingdom is within us, and that we are in God's kingdom. Remembering our baptism reminds us that we are loved. And it also reminds us that we are created to love. It reminds us, as we remember our baptism, to go to the source of the living water, the one who is the living water. Because when we go and we sit with the living water, with Jesus, with no agenda, just sit, listen, watch. We're refreshed. We're made new. We find this in prayer. We find this sitting by the river. We find this in the living water. Coming to the water, as you might imagine, is in my nature. But the truth is, it's in all of our natures. All of us, deep inside ourselves, want to come to the living water and be refreshed. Just like we would on a hot summer day. So today, I invite you to come to the living water and be refreshed. And so this is our baptismal font. And I'm going to squirm it around here a little bit. Move the holy kisses. So I don't know if you pick up on my container for the water, for the living water, right? This is the little cup that I got on my last visit to the hospital. You see, Jesus can refresh us wherever we are. And sometimes we get little keepsakes out of it as well. And so today, when we come to the living water, we remember that we are beloved. We remember that the living water refreshes us. We remember that Jesus heals. We remember that Jesus strengthens. We remember that the worst thing is never the last thing for us. So today, I invite you to come and remember your baptism. Oftentimes when I'm on the river, I will remember my baptism as well. When I'm out in my kayak or canoe or just standing by the river, I'll remember God's love for me. I'll remember my baptism and my belovedness and put my fingers in the water. Usually I'll draw a little cross on my head to remember. Sometimes I'll touch the water to my lips, remembering God's kisses for me. Sometimes I just touch my heart. But today, I invite you to remember your baptism, however, and remember your belovedness, and remember that God refreshes us when we come. So please come. I invite everyone to come to the water.